are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2002, the Taiwan Assurance Act of 2019.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2002, a bill to foster security in Taiwan and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Sires, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 2002, the Taiwan Assurance Act of 2019.
Without objection,
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
the gentleman is recognized.
I rise in strong support of H.R. 2002, the Taiwan Assurance Act of 2019. Last month, we celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act. So it is fitting that we are standing here today to bring 2 important measures to the floor, including this one, to affirm the unwavering bipartisan congressional support for Taiwan. Taiwan serves as a steadfast and significant partner to the United States, not just in the Indo-Pacific, but also around the world. It makes substantial contributions to the international community by tackling global challenges from combating terrorism to promoting public health. And it holds close the values we cherish the most, standing as a beacon of democracy in Asia. However, over the years, China has attempted to weaken Taiwan's standing in the world. It has restricted Taiwan's access to international organizations and poached its diplomatic allies. And it has attempted to shape the way the United States conducts its relationship with Taiwan, a dynamic that we have regretfully allowed. We cannot stand for this. We cannot sit idly by and allow one of our most valued democratic partners to be sidelined on the world stage. It is time to revisit the guidelines we use in the conduct of our relationship with Taiwan and ensure that the United States is doing all it can to fulfill our commitments to Taiwan. That is why I am proud to support and co-sponsor the Taiwan Assurance Act. This measure asks the State Department to take a closer look at self-imposed guidelines we follow with Taiwan and assess them based on merit, not on what would appease China. As proud co-chair of the Taiwan Caucus, I strongly support the passage of H.R. 2002, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman may proceed.
I rise in support of the Taiwan Assurance Act, a bill introduced to deepen and expand U.S.-Taiwan relations. I want to thank Chairman Engel and all those on the other side of the aisle and the gentleman from New Jersey for agreeing to be the lead Democrat co-sponsors of this important bill that deepens our ties with Taiwan. Of note, the bill urges the State Department to eliminate self-imposed restrictions on U.S. diplomatic interactions with Taiwan and to provide Congress access to those policies for the first time. Prior administrations have applied unnecessary and arbitrary restrictions on their own interactions with officials from Taiwan. At times, these restrictions expanded apparently in response to complaints by Communist China. As a body that produced the Taiwan Relations Act, it is necessary and appropriate for Congress to have awareness and a say in how these policies are made. They go well beyond what is required by the carefully crafted TRA, which does not even state that U.S.-Taiwan relations are unofficial. And since the TRA was enacted in 1979, Taiwan's government has evolved into a vibrant democracy. With China's government, while the Chinese government has become more and more authoritative. It is improper to restrict relations with Taiwan to avoid offending the Chinese Communist Party. And it's out of step with reality to keep pretending that Taiwan is anything other than a fully functioning democracy. Taiwan deserves a more elevated relationship with the United States. And I urge my colleagues to join me in rewarding Taiwan's commitment to democracy by supporting the Taiwan Assistance Act. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time. I will inquire through the Speaker if my colleague has any remaining speakers on his side.
From Texas have any further?
No, Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close.
Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In closing, I'd just like to once again thank Chairman Engel and the entire Foreign Affairs Committee for their enthusiastic support for this measure and their support for the democracy of Taiwan. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas yields. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this measure. This is an important bill that demonstrates our historical bipartisan support for Taiwan. And so, as co-chair of the Taiwan Caucus, I strongly promote the immediate passage of H.R. 2002. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2002? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Gentleman from New Jersey. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and agree to H.R. 273.
Gentleman will suspend. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 273, resolution reaffirming the United States commitment to Taiwan and to the implementation of the Taiwan Relations Act.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Sires, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 273, reaffirming the United States commitment to Taiwan to the implementation of the Taiwan Relations Act. I yield myself as such time as may consume. I rise in strong support of H.R. 273, reaffirming the United States commitment to Taiwan and to the implementation of the Taiwan Relations Act. Signed into law 4 decades ago, the Taiwan Relations Act marked the first and most significant act of support for Taiwan by Congress. It unequivocally demonstrates our support to Taiwan, along with the 6 assurances. This act remains the bedrock of our deep partnership in Taiwan. With the support of this landmark piece of legislation, and in the 40 years since, the United States has deepened security, economic, and people-to-people ties with Taiwan. Our 2 nations have worked together to maintain the peace, security, and stability in the Pacific through our shared commitment to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Unfortunately, China seeks to diminish Taiwan's presence on the world stage. We must fully use the tools at our disposal to fight back against these efforts. It is important that Congress must do what we can to honor our commitment to Taiwan. That is why I have long been a proud co-chair of the Taiwan's caucus, and why I support this measure. HRS 237 reaffirms our commitment to the people of Taiwan, encourages high-level engagement as called for in the Taiwan Travel Act, promotes Taiwan meaningful engagement in international organizations, and calls to deepen cultural ties. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this resolution reaffirming the United States' commitment to Taiwan and the implementation of the Taiwan Relations Act. I also want to thank my good friend Chairman Engel and Congressman Series for offering this resolution, which gives us an opportunity to reflect on the importance of the U.S.-Taiwan relations at a very critical time. As the House considers this measure today, the United States and Taiwan share in a celebration, the 40th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act, which occurred on April 10th of this year. The Taiwan's Relations Act remains one of Congress's most distinguished and lasting contributions to U.S. foreign policy. The TRA built an unshakable foundation for U.S.-Taiwan relations, and the people of Taiwan have repaid this gesture by transforming Taiwan into a beacon of democracy and individual liberties. As is often said, Taiwan is a force for good in the world. Reaffirming the U.S. commitment to Taiwan at this moment is also essential because we're standing together to face a growing threat. Communist Party General Secretary Xi is using all the tools at his disposal, military, economic, informational, and diplomatic, to try to destroy Taiwan's democracy. So I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this resolution to remind him once again that he will not succeed on our watch. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time. Oh, you
Does the gentleman reserve?
balance my time. I didn't know you were here.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentleman from New Jersey reserves, and the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr.
Recognized.
Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Shabbat, a senior member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and a former chairman of the Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific.
The gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. We appreciate the time, and I rise in support of HRES 273, which reaffirms the United States' commitment to Taiwan and the implementation of the Taiwan Relations Act, or TRA. As a longtime friend of the people of Taiwan and a founding co-chair of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus, and as a co-sponsor of this resolution, I want to thank Chairman Engel and Ranking Member McCall for their work to support our critical bilateral relationship with Taiwan. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act, which together with President Reagan's 6 assurances serve as the foundation for the relationship between our two countries, and I mean countries. Since the TRA was signed in 1979, Taiwan has become a vibrant, consolidated democracy, one of our most important trading partners and a model in so many areas for the rest of Asia and the whole world, really. Going forward, we must continue to implement the TRA and do better at fully appreciating the policy commitments it contains. With that in mind, I urge the President to immediately finalize an arms sales package with Taiwan, as well as begin negotiations for a free trade agreement. As China's influence grows, our commitment to Taiwan will be the bellwether of our commitment to democracy in Asia. We do not owe China a vote in how we treat Taiwan. If we are equivocal in our support for Taiwan in the face of Chinese pressure, how can we credibly support democracy and democratic values when they're threatened elsewhere? I also want to voice my support for H.R. 2002, Ranking Member McCall's Taiwan Assurance Act. This legislation takes important steps to advance our bilateral relationship, including support for arms sales and for Taiwan's participation in international organizations. It would also require a review of the State Department's, I believe, unreasonable guidelines for Taiwan's diplomatic staff here in the U.S. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I wish the legislation did not refer to the misguided U.S. One China policy, but I understand that it was included as part of negotiations with the Senate. Finally, the Taiwan Assurance Act requires a report on implementation of the Taiwan Travel Act, legislation that I introduced last Congress to increase high-level visits between the U.S. and Taiwanese officials. Since the bill became law a little over a year ago, we've seen not enough action, and I believe it's past time for full implementation of this important legislation. As we mark the TRA's 40th anniversary, HRES 273 and 2002 are critical to strengthening our enduring relationship with Taiwan as we look forward to the next 40 years. So I would urge my colleagues to support both of them, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time and will inquire through the Speaker if my colleague has any remaining speakers on his side.
Does the gentleman from Texas have any remaining speakers?
No, Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to yield back at this time.
The gentleman is recognized to close.
And I yield back. Thank you.
And he yields back. The gentleman from Texas yields, and the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized to close.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this important resolution, HRES 273, reaffirming our commitment made to Taiwan 40 years ago and strengthens our abilities to fulfill them. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 273? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Mr. Speaker,
the gentleman from New
I
Jersey.
request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1704, the Championing American Business Through Diplomacy Act of 2019.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1704, a bill to foster commercial relations with foreign countries and support United States economic and business interests abroad in the conduct of foreign policy and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Series, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include strenuous material on H.R. 1704, the Championing American Business Through Diplomacy Act of 2019.
Without objection, and the gentleman from New Jersey may proceed.
I yield myself such time as may consume. I would like to thank first Mr. McCall for his hard work on this legislation. I am proud to be supporting this legislation, this bipartisan measure, which makes better use of the State Department resources to increase exports of American-made goods and American-provided services, and in turn create more jobs for the American workers. This important bill supports the 277,000 small and medium-sized businesses that are trying to sell U.S. origin goods and services across the globe. They need help understanding the overseas market, locating customers for U.S. origin products, dealing with local imports and custom rules, and arranging financing for their export sales. All these efforts support U.S. jobs. Economic officers in our embassies and at the State Department in Washington can help exporters deal with these challenges. This piece of legislation improves the State Department's training program for economic officers, affirms a long-standing directive to U.S. ambassadors to include commercial and economic issues in their portfolios, and strengthens coordination between the State Department and the Commerce Department by consolidating data on overseas markets. These efforts fortify the key role of our State Department, provides critical confirmation to U.S. exporters, and makes more efficient use of public funds. H.R. 1704 is a critical bill that will not only spur exports and job growth, but will ultimately improve the lives of the American people. Our sponsors and I would also like to clarify the requirements under Section 9 of H.R. 1704 to initiate and pursue negotiations with countries to establish international standards for government-supported quality infrastructure investments overseas. It's intended to fulfill within the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. This bill does not direct or authorize the Secretary of State to initiate or pursue negotiations in World Trade Organization or amend any multilateral or plurilateral WTO agreements. And with that, I strongly support this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves his time. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of my Championing American Business Through Diplomacy Act, which I was pleased to introduce with the support of my good friend, Chairman Engel. Promoting American business abroad means promoting American leadership, prosperity, and our values. And it's always been and should remain a key component of global diplomacy. In fact, the very first edition of the Foreign Service Journal, then called American Consular Bulletin, published in March of 1919, and included a letter from the editor that stated, quote, "The consular service was organized by our government for the purpose of furthering the interest of American businesses abroad," end of quote. This legislation makes the promotion of U.S. economic interests a principal duty of our missions abroad and requires economic and commercial training for our diplomats. It also directs our foreign missions to promote trade agreements and establish points of contact who can assist American businesses interested in entering those foreign markets. Promotion of American businesses abroad has never been more important. As transitioning economies work to expand their wealth and capacity, they look to America to bring expertise, financing, and ingenuity. If America does not step up its economic engagement in the world, this vacuum will be filled by others, with a potentially devastating impact on American national security. While I speak, China is aggressively filling that void. However, its approach does not respect the rights of workers, the environment, or even the sovereignty of other nations. China's Belt and Road Initiative is ensnaring developing nations into Chinese debt traps from which they may never escape. This effort is also leading to a new Chinese adventurism, complete with military outposts and expanded leverage in various countries. Ground zero for this competition is in the developing world of Africa. I have spent much time with the African governments and business leaders, all who have told me that America is just not there to compete. I applaud the administration for its new Prosper Africa efforts and know that this legislation is key to its success. I can think of no better antidote to combat this predatory influence than unleashing the vitality of American values through our private sector. I naturally think of the world-class tech and energy companies in my own district and home state of Texas. Creating more international opportunities for American businesses will help push back on growing Chinese influence across the globe. It's time for America to fully wake up and get on the field, or we may ask ourselves later why we did not do more to contain the Chinese threat. So for these reasons, the Championing American Business Through Diplomacy Act is a critical initiative that deserves our unanimous support. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time and will inquire through the Speaker if my colleague has any remaining speakers on his side.
Does the gentleman from Texas have any?
No, Mr. Speaker, I do not have any other speakers, and I am prepared to close.
The gentleman is recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In closing, I just want to again thank Chairman Engel for his support of this bipartisan bill, which was adopted unanimously at our committee markup last month. American businesses represent ingenuity, industry, and opportunity. And unlike our strategic competitors, they do not go overseas pushing large government-subsidized construction projects that involve massive debt or giving up control of strategic infrastructure. They seek only access to markets and a fair playing field, which allows a kind of win-win partnerships that are the genius of the free enterprise system. In this era of strategic competition, supporting their access to these economies abroad should be a priority of American diplomacy. The stability that we help provide with our enterprise will help bring us and the world security as well. That is the aim of this bill. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this important measure. H.R. 1704 works to fully and efficiently use the resources we already have to increase exports and create jobs, and in turn, improve the lives of the American people. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1704? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and with
Speaker,
the gentleman from Texas.
I respectfully request the yeas and the nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.
And we'll bring you back to the House floor live at 6:30.